few questions for you. I
Yes.
have three questions. One is about me, the other two are about other people. The first is this weekend, which was amazing, and Birch is my new best friend.
Yeah, it's in Perch amazing. Like it really,
Oh,
you don't think of it like is for psychological healing or esoteric practices, but oh man, it's right up there with the fancy stuff.
it is
Hmm.
incredible. I can't, I just take it around with me. It's so
Hmm.
incredible. Um, you talked about sage for chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. Would that also be true for Epstein-Barr?
Yeah, yeah, like because a lot of times in that realm, like a lot of times they'll use kind of like a blanket diagnosis. It's basically they're all kind of similar. Sometimes the person will show the like in testing that their Epstein-Barr is present. Sometimes it won't, but they'll still have a lot of the same symptoms. And the other thing that I'd throw in there is Lyme's disease. You know, sometimes these can be like overlapping. And so anything where there's like a lot of inflammation, like if you think about it like this, anytime there's a lot of inflammation, the body is dealing with a lot of inflammatory material that then the lymphatic system has to try to like process. And at some point, there's just too much, and the lymphatic system starts to get overwhelmed. And then the next phase is the lymphatic system gets really like sluggish and slows down significantly. The lymph in the vessels themselves get like really kind of thick and viscous. Then the next phase is that stagnant lymph then causes sensory nerves to start firing more rapidly, right? Because of the agitation that comes from the like the tissue toxicity. And then the nerves are firing more rapidly. And then eventually what happens is all of that sensory information is going to the brain. And over a period of time, it's just so much information for the brain to process. And it's just sensory information. It's not like they're having to process people's words or anything. It's just, the sensory nerves are just firing so fast that eventually the brain starts to get overwhelmed and actually becomes fatigued. And so that's why a lot of times things like those conditions and post PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, these are all basically like a brain fatigue syndrome that yes, there's some trauma with the PTSD, but a lot of it is lymphatic function and then eventually sensory nerves. Like anytime you have a traumatic event, one of the byproducts of it is that you go a little bit on like red alert, and that makes you like hyper aware of your environment because somebody's been shooting at you or there was an accident or whatever it was. And at some point, so much of that sensory information is going to the brain that the brain just gets fatigued and just starts to give up a little bit and starts to deplete. And then this starts a cascading effect going on through different parts of the body. So you wouldn't think of like lymphatic function as being part of a PTSD, issue, but usually something where there's a brain fatigue syndrome, it could be in a different several different kinds of conditions. You always got to come back to like calming down the sensory nerves, strengthening the brain, starting to detoxify tissues, things like this, reducing inflammation. Um, Anything inflammatory always has the potential. That's why, like, when we're talking about like bone on bone situation with like the hips or the knees, keeping good proper blood movement and reducing inflammation in the areas is really kind of critical, because at some point the inflammation stops being there and it starts to spread to the body. And then as it spreads to the body, it starts this kind of syndrome that begin its like process. And so like even in situations like that, there's localized inflammation, but like when it comes systemic, it gets a little bit more serious. And so usually, because you get brain fatigue, fog, which is you can unwind all of that, but it's still you're having to really detoxify the inflammation in the body. And so with with inflammation, the sage helps right off the bat, but at some point you do need to like support the lymphatic system and also support the detoxification of the tissues. And so even when we're looking at different conditions, a lot of times, even though the lymphatic system might be working okay, it might not be detoxifying tissues quite like it could. And if I remember right, let me look something up here. We're even putting in, yeah, like even in the next class, the one that's for the white light and everything, we're even putting in a Lovage body tonic, like a good, like full size. And part of it is it detoxifies the body. It helps to remove the inflammatory material from the tissue and get it processed by the lymphatic system. And so even for here, we're using it to calm things down so that more spiritual energy can pass through. Because again, when the sensory nerves are hyper reactive, it doesn't allow the brain to function quite like it should. And so even cognitive function or brain function, spiritual meditations and practices can be impacted because of just the hyperactivity of the sensory nerves. And so we're wanting to calm down certain aspects so that the body can process spiritual energy properly. And so after you go through and you do the sage, a lot of times what I would do is you could use like the lovage as a follow-up. You could give some things internally for reducing inflammation. So, you go down the road of black cumin, ginger, frankincense, turmeric, something in that realm. Even frankincense can be helpful in this arena, and then just slowly unwind the lymphatic system. And I like doing the sage right off the bat because it's strengthening the body, it's toning to the adrenals, it calms down sensory nerves, and it strengthens the brain all at once. And so you're kind of taking the body out of crisis a little bit. Doesn't mean that it's done, but if somebody has like a fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, like crisis, it usually is a lot of fatigue, their body hurts, they have a hard time getting out of bed, they just feel achy, can't get comfortable. Covering the body in the sage, body tonic or alcohol or, any form of that will usually pull them out of that crisis within, a lot of times the same day, but usually by the next day. Every once in a while they need to have a couple applications, but it's pretty amazing actually when you do it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you.